Okay, so let's get the old party started. Oh, there's me in the corner there. Maybe I'll make my face in the front today. How the fuck do I do that? Display capture. There we go. Nice. Okay. All right, so what are we doing here? All right, so let's go to... So basically today what we're doing is I'm going to answer some questions from the patrons over on Patreon. And so without further ado, the first question is by BFNK. What are some good tips / practices to maintain all sections of a tune full and powerful without having parts and intersections that sound and look very thin in relation to the drops, and without destroying the sound with overcompression limiting distortion? So that's a really good question. Let me think about it a little bit. Some good tips for practices to maintain all sections of a tune. Okay, so I mean, I think the main thing with this question is, I think this is a mixing question, and it sounds like the way that you're approaching it is sort of like your reference to overcompression limiting distortion. Sounds like you're referencing mastering, and I think, like, okay, so let's look at a recent tune. I think it was this one. So this is a tune that I made that has like quite a bit of dynamics in it. I think, like, so okay, so I guess my question is, like, are you talking about balancing, like, a part that's supposed to be quiet with a part that's supposed to be loud? Or are you talking about balancing, like you have one section that's, like, pretty loud, and then you want another section to be much louder or feel much more intense or whatever? Where are you sort of at with that process? I'll wait for the lag to catch up. Okay, so let's listen through, because this one has like some... Maybe I can close everything here. Nope, that's the wrong fucking thing. All right, whatever. It's actually probably good that that doesn't work. Just gonna quickly close everything in here. God fucking damn it. Ugh. There we go. Okay, so we can kind of see the whole song. Good soft sound. Okay, cool. So yeah, so let's take a listen here. Okay, so I think this really, yeah. So this really just is a question of mixing. So like, I don't. Oh, here, let's take off the shit on the master, and let's see what it. So this is pretty fucking quiet without the mastering. This part's pretty quiet without the mastering too. But yeah, the idea is just sort of like you don't actually want to make your quiet parts all that quiet, but you want to make them feel quiet, right? So like this sample, for example, is a very quiet sounding sample even without that noise channel, which, where the fuck is that? Right, there it is. So even without this noise thing, like this is a super quiet sample, but the mastering at the end will like boost it up quite a lot. And then at that point it might feel a bit too loud if you're used to listening to it like this, but it'll all kind of like balance out. And like it's sort of it's kind of about like just getting used to what those balances sound like. So like the more you play around with this kind of stuff, you get a feeling for like, okay, this is quiet, but it's like loud enough that it's not going to sound weak. Also, like having more bass in the quiet bits can help them feel a bit like feel a bit more sort of powerful without being overbearing, like depending on the kind of bass that you put in there. And then if we kind of zoom in to like those moments with the like, where is that fucking thing? Is it this? Yeah. So that this lead, this was kind of the trickiest part of this mix of like, because you know in those like old rap songs where they have that like the old NWA tunes have that like whiny gangster sound, and I really like that sound, so I wanted to do something like that. But in the context of a mix like this, you also don't want it too loud, like those West Coast whistle. Those tracks like usually don't have as much high-end stuff, right? So finding the balance between this and the other stuff, like that was a bit tricky. And also when I think about this sound, I often imagine it being quite a bit higher, and I don't know if that's true because I didn't like A/B it against anything, but I kind of found that it felt like it fit best in this area. And it's also kind of about like in different sections you want different things to overshadow other things. Like part of your mixing is like deciding what things are going to be the main focus at different times. So I think like that's part of it too. Like, so since this is like not as loud, it's supposed to sort of feel like kind of cradled in the mix. It's supposed to be kind of like cradled in the mix, but like not too loud in general. And then I pull everything back so that there's these moments where it's more of the center, right? And then this stuff, like honestly, one of the ways that I often think about it is like how quiet can I make this element without it losing, like, so when I was trying to find a good level for this, first it started out obviously at 0, right? So And then I felt like I wasn't sure if it was poking out too much, so I started like lowering it, and then, you know, and then around here it's like maybe too quiet, like it doesn't feel like it's enough. So then slowly like moving it up a bit and kind of moving up and moving down until you find like a nice little spot where it's like just loud enough that it gives the impression that you want, but not so loud that it's overpowering, and not so quiet that it's sort of lost in the mix. So that's my general way of approaching like fitting things into a mix. As far as like drum layers go and stuff, I'll often just like smash everything into an OTT. Like this one has just a bunch of fucking distortion and shit. And then into OTT, and then into drum bus. So these are all kind of like unified level. Everything that's going to be in this bus is going to be around the same level. We can like listen to that by itself. And then I ended up just like layering other little breaks and shit on top of that, because I wasn't quite sure how to get the other stuff to sit nicely against that. Yeah, so that's one of the things too, is like, if I can't get the thing to sound right after fucking around with it for a long time, often I'll be like, okay, maybe it just doesn't fit with the song. Like, sometimes I'm really stubborn about it. Like with this one, this really felt like it wouldn't work in the song. I was really kind of worried that this whiny thing would not be able to fit in the song. And I had another problem with that with the flutes here. I think that's these guys. I wasn't able to get them to fit. And so my solution for this one was like, initially this had no automation on the volume. And that's nice, but I feel like it takes away from the choppiness, which I think is kind of an important part of this song. So that's why I ended up going back to having, like, just trying to cut it out at different parts so that we had this back and forth between these two elements. Sort of, sometimes they line up, sometimes they don't. And then thinking about back and forth between these other elements, it was like a bit too choppy without something kind of droning in the background, but I didn't want it to be too, like, I didn't want it to be the flutes. I can't remember why, but so like, that's also this section. These guys are down an octave and they're filtered, and I think that helped to sort of fit it in the mix. Like your first, I mean, so my take on it is that your first approach should always be volume. Like, just try to fix the issue with the volume. If you can't fix the issue with the volume, then kind of try filtering, try dropping it an octave or putting it up an octave. If you want it to be more background, you could try some reverb. If you want it to be more in the foreground, sometimes distortion has this effect of bringing stuff forward. What else? You can also do stuff with the EQ, for example. Like, say we look at the flute bit. One way of sort of bringing it forward would be to look at the EQ. And then we see, like, the majority of the information's here, so we could... And just sort of, like, searching around for a place where it makes sense to... yeah, one day, Glorklung. One day. Yeah, just finding, like, a nice place where that will help it poke out. But yeah, like Glorklung said, like, a lot of people use sidechain. I don't know why. I find sidechain, like, just rarely gives me what I want, no matter how much I fuck with it. So that's why I don't usually use it. But yeah, I think, like, yeah. So quick recap, like, Use the levels. Try muting stuff to see if like just cutting it out at certain parts might help it like lock into the mix a bit more. Harsh muting also gives you like these really nice choppy bits. Next would be like EQ, and then like filtering, reverb, etc., etc. Okay, cool. So let's move on to the next question. This one's by May. Okay, so what do I need to do if tomorrow someone asks me to play live in a club? Is it enough with a Focusrite 212 or 2i2? What cables would I need? What things the club should provide? In general, basically, I would like to start a conversation on playing live and what should be needed. Okay, so a good way to start with this is like let's just look at my tech writer. I think I have an example of a tech writer somewhere here. Maybe I should look at this off screen. I don't have a tech writer in here somewhere. Waiting for me to find the right place where the thing is. Yeah. Maybe it's in my documents. It's not in my documents. Maybe it's in this folder. It's not in that folder. Yeah. Where the fuck is my tech writer? Okay, I think I know where I can find it. One sec. I like to keep my tech writer in my Google Drive. I keep most stuff in my Google Drive, to be honest. Shit is sick. Tech writer. Whoops, writer. Okay, stand by. Stand by for tech writer. Oh, snare police. Okay, so I think this is like a pretty basic tech writer. Here. Okay, so the reason that I'm bringing up the tech writer is like, the tech writer is basically the agreement of like what they're gonna bring, what you're gonna bring. There's some things that like, sometimes you won't get, you won't be allowed, or they won't ask you for a tech writer, and then if you have one, they won't honor it, which is fucking annoying, but it's the way the world is, I guess. So like, okay, so this is like the basic breakdown, right? So provided by the artist, I'm gonna bring my computer, MIDI controller, and you want to tell them, sometimes you want to tell them stuff like this because it factors into how much space on the table they're gonna give you. Cables, so these cables are like everything that I need to plug into my computer. The things that the venue should have is like, which isn't sort of detailed in this, but like, because there's a lot of different ways, and I usually just bring a lot of stuff. But look, so here I have stereo 1/4-inch audio output, right? So they know they're gonna need to have stereo 1/4-inch cables to plug into my output. I still bring an extra pair of 1/4-inch cables. I also still bring like adapters for RCA. If it's a club with like a DJ mixer, then that's the easiest way to plug into a DJ mixer. So I'll bring the adapters, and I'll bring like what's it called, the cable to plug into the mixer. It's good to be prepared, like so depending on how pro the club is, like you'll get like more or less of this stuff will be like, yeah, well, obviously we're gonna have this or whatever. But then some like kind of, you know, if it's your first gig in a smaller club, like, yeah, they might not have stuff like that. So it's good to be prepared in that case. Like think about, so in that case I would think like, okay, so what do you use to plug into a mixer. It's usually RCA, or you have 1/4 inch. Wait, what? Am I not? Wait, what's happening? Okay, I'm just gonna. Yeah. So, so you want to be able to plug into a mixer. So usually, stereo RCA and stereo 1/4 inch is. How often do you play at clubs, and where are they? Because I want to go. It really, really ranges. Like sometimes I'll play a lot more. Sometimes I'll have more like tours lined up and stuff, and sometimes, like last year, this year, obviously, very few. Some years it's like a couple shows a year, and I don't play that much in clubs anymore. Not for lack of trying, though, to be honest. Anyways, so there's that sort of stuff. This is for my video out, HDMI output. You also might want to have options for that if it's a smaller club, or they might not be able to provide that, or they might not be able to run video from the stage, which is another fucking thing. This other stuff that you might want to specify, and if you can't send a tech rider, which maybe you should just send a tech rider anyways, but if you can't send a tech rider, it's not that kind of situation, because I know that does come out. So you can just ask the promoter, like, okay, like, how many outlets am I going to have on stage? Or you could bring a what's it called? Fucking power bar or something, just in case. I played a show in Colombia where they didn't have a power bar on stage, which was kind of funny. It still made it work, but anyways, this, I like to specify that I want stereo sound in the booth, because sometimes they'll set you up with like a mono like what's it called, monitor, and I just find it kind of harder to play when I can't hear the stereo. And also some clubs will have like won't have a stereo PA, like they'll mono sub your stuff, or they won't have subs, which is like brutal. That's happened to me a bunch of times. But I like to specify this stuff now, because it's like, okay, yeah, this is necessary. But again, like when you're starting out, you're not always able to specify all this stuff. This is for my video shit. So I backline a computer monitor, mouse, and keyboard now, because I tour with my like desktop rig. Which actually, this is like a weird composite tech rider that must have been in between those changes. But anyway, so yeah, and then you want to specify like you need a bit of space on your table. You could be more specific with this, like, oh, I need like this many inches or whatever. I like to specify that I want a tall table, because I'm fucking tall and it hurts my back, and I look like an idiot on stage if the table is short. Yeah, and then this is some other extra shit, like, so I say like I think it looks the best, and I try to design my visuals in a way where like it should hit me, and then the screen should be behind me, so there's this kind of like, you get this kind of effect, because I try to design my visuals so that they like frame me, like that I'm sort of like part of the thing. And yeah, there's other stuff, like the bigger you get, you have more options here, right? You could also have like a separate hospitality rider if you're super big or whatever, where you're like, okay, I want water and I want these kind of snacks or whatever. Yeah, so yeah, that sort of stuff. And then yeah, like, this is funny that I put this, because it's sort of redundant. Like, this is generally how it will look. Like, you have this kind of stage area, and then you'll have a table, and then depending on the gig, like, you might have to share this table space. But like, I guess just to kind of touch back on the question, like, so let's just read it again. What do I need if tomorrow someone asks me to play live in a club? Is it enough with Focusrite 212? So yes. What cables will I need? 1/4 inch and RCA most likely. What things the club should, and a power bar maybe. What things the club should provide. They'll usually provide you with stereo DIs or a plug into a DJ mixer. And then in general, basically, I would like to start a conversation about playing live and what should be needed. So those are the main things. And then I would say, like, if you're nervous about it, just make sure you show up early and you can kind of get a feel for the space. Make sure to ask for a sound check because they don't always give you that sort of thing. Sometimes you won't get a sound check and it can be kind of nerve-wracking if it's your first time and you don't get to do a sound check, but that's okay. You'll be fine even without a sound check. And also it's okay, like, it's even if it's not gonna work well. Some gigs just aren't great and we just kind of have to deal with that. Okay, and so part 2 of the question is, how do you prepare your tracks for playing a live show? Do you keep stems of your tracks? Should I master my stems as well, etc., etc., etc.? Okay, so mastering helps for your... I have a bunch of different live setups, so let's try and find one. Where would they be? I think they're in this folder. Yeah, here's like this Touch Designer set's probably a good example. Okay, so, right. So here's the comped out version. So what I do is, like, I'll render the whole set to like 3, 4, 5 stems. Usually 5 max, because you don't want to... You're going to be using so much CPU just like reading so much audio at the same time. Here, I'll show you it also before comping, just to give you an idea. Oh yeah, so this one was a composite of a bunch of different sets, actually. So here you can see some stems from some of the tracks, or these are some more stems. Oh yeah, so this one was already comped, and then I ended up adding a couple layers and then comping it again. Because I kind of realized that, like, not only is it too much to think about to have so many layers, but it's like not that helpful. You can't do that much extra if you have control over that much layers. It's just so much to think about on stage. So that's why I ended up kind of grouping it all down and exporting those separate things as stems. And then this is my whole, like, this is all the visuals cues. So then, yeah, these are all messages that send to Touch Designer via OSC, and there's like a bunch of different things that control different stuff. So this stuff is just for the first scene, I think. And then yeah, and then so these I can, like, if I wanted to, I could take over those and control those as well. So Travesty said not to lose focus, but does using the RAM function on samples help with CPU? So it can. You also want to be wary of how much shit you're loading into RAM, right? Because these guys are at 32 bits, 44.1, so they're going to be pretty fucking huge files. Loading it into RAM, loading smaller samples into RAM for sure. But yeah, it's not going to help with, I don't think it's going to help with CPU, but what it will help with is, like, you won't get these disk read errors where it wasn't able to read from the disk fast enough. So one of the things that I do is, like, I have 2 drives in here, and one of them is SSD, like a smaller SSD, and then I have a normal hard drive for most of my shit. And when I'm gonna play a set, I'll move everything to the SSD drive. So then it's sort of like an in-between spot between RAM. Actually, it's like much closer to hard drives because RAM is super fucking fast, but this is kind of a happy medium. I found that it works well enough. So let's move to the Touch Designer set that's comped, And then I wonder if I saved the effects on here. I might have not saved them. Oh, this is not the right folder one. Okay, hold on. This one maybe. Oh shit. Fuck. I just skip missing because we don't really care that much about this. I just want to show how it works, basically. This one might not be the comp down one, so I maybe won't have effects on the channels yet. Okay. So yeah, okay, this is not a good example. So a lot of these sets, I'll like make them from scratch or make a big chunk of the set from scratch, like leading up to the show. I just find it's kind of more fun, and then you have stuff that your fans haven't heard and stuff. I'll throw in like a track that's like part of my discography at like one point or another, but like most of it will be new stuff, which I think is kind of a fun way to do it. I really want to find an example of one that's here. Woulg Live, February 2019. Candy Shop. This one might be done. I always set up the effects at the last minute. That's why these aren't. I may have not saved them. We can go over what I usually do though. So this is kind of a more standard setup. This is like what I'll do for things that are like DJ gigs. Is I'll plan out the whole set, and then I'll put a couple extra layers of stuff. And then these ones don't have the effects either. Okay, well, we can kind of like talk a little bit about how I would generally build that. So audio effects, I might have some of my channel stuff here. Okay, so this is one that I'll do a lot. So this is like a chop thing, so you can do so you can do that kind of stuff with a button press. I also have chop 50, which is like just 50%, so you can kind of jam on it without breaking up the rhythm too much. What else do we have? I'll usually do something like, where's that motherfucker? Track delay glitch. I usually have something like this too. It's kind of a bad example. What's the time? Why the fuck is this set to halfway? Oh, right, this is supposed to be like a non-intrusive one. Yeah, this one sucks. Okay. Yeah, some stuff like that. Stuff like this. Again with the... So anyways, you can get some stuff like that. This one's, again, not a super great one. I use a shitload of delays, because if you use delays in a nice way, you can get tons and tons of... Oops, that's for multi-channel. Using delays, you can kind of like pull out little elements and make those elements repeat every certain amount of time, and the way that if you're triggering them and playing with them in a good way, you can basically like change the way the track sounds, change the drum part or something like that. And especially if you have them stemmed out, you get a lot of really great stuff out of that. So like, for example, when I have the track stemmed out, I'll put chop 100 on the drum rack. Sometimes I'll put both, like chop 100 and chop 50. And there's this great thing too where like, so say we go like you start getting like really fucking weird drum patterns, and you can really play with it live, like linking into stuff. Yeah, so that's one way. Let's look at the way that I would generally set up like delay channels, which I swear I had something for that. Oh, here we go. So I use this a shitload. And then you basically just want to set them up so that they're all at different speeds. And then you can make new rhythms by like... Yeah, you got to be a little bit more on top of it. Like if I had a MIDI controller here, I would set that up, but I don't really have that right now. Yeah, I get so much out of this, like just out of this simple setup. And sometimes I'll do two versions of this, right? So one with the delay times at like, 1, 2, 3, and then I'll make another one that has them at like 4, 5, 6 or something like that, or sometimes 8, and then you can with that you can get quite a lot of different stuff. And so that, and then mix with some more kind of glitchy effects. We have like that sometimes is a nice thing to have. There's some what else do we have? Weird freeze. Maybe this is something. Oh, this is something else. No, not that. Fry. Yeah, this is a fun one too. Just like you have to pick the appropriate track to do this stuff on, but yeah. The nice thing I think about having it an arrangement also is like you can have a ton of different, like for example, you could set it up so that you have a different set of effects for this track, a different set of effects for this track. And when I was doing our Interpolate show, that's how I had it, is like I had the same bank of controls, but for the first chunk of this set, they would, like first 10 minutes or so, they would control a certain amount of parameters. And then for the next chunk of the set, they would control a bunch of other parameters. The next chunk, they would control other parameters, blah, 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 blah. So that's a really fun way to set it up. It leads to a little bit of confusion on stage when like all of a sudden your controls are doing something different. You're like, wait, wasn't this supposed to be doing something else? But it's just about setting it up right. And then you can I sometimes will have just a little cheat sheet paper on the stage, and then I'll have some notes in here, like, so I'll say like add locator, and then this is like scene 2 or something, and then I know like scene 2 is paper number 2 or something, and then I'll look down and it says like, okay, this controls this controls this controls this, and like the more you practice it, the more you memorize those things, so you don't need the piece of paper anymore. That kind of stuff is super fun. The other stuff that I really like doing, I don't do it a ton, but I really like this idea of like, so say we were to, let's try and make a thing, we'll just do this kind of quickly, but so, actually I'm going to go a little bit, oh no, there's a better way to do this, I think. Okay, and then let's do like amp, and we'll do ring mod. Oh, this is on the wrong channel, I think. Oh no, wait. Where the fuck are we? Where did I put that? Oh, here we go. Okay, cool. So I'm just trying to boost this up a little bit. Okay. So now if we use some creative auto pan or what's it called? Or so we see we've like added this hi-hat pattern, and we can just like, but the hi-hat pattern is made out of whatever song, so it'll sound slightly different. And it's like slightly reactive to, you know, whatever's going into it. So that's one thing that I find really interesting. And you can do that for pretty much any part of the drums. You can make any sort of extra percussive thing, or you can make an extra tonal type thing. Like one of the things that I often like to do for tonal stuff is I'll use chorus. And usually I'll set this up in a particular way, which I can't be bothered to figure out right now, but to do this kind of like, and like this parameter will control the dry wet as well. And then you get some nice like, it's kind of a nice way to control all the different stuff. Okay, so that's the basics of that. What to be aware of. Oh, how do you prepare your tracks for playing a live show? Okay, so for the tracks, like, so for in this kind of DJ, quote unquote, like heavy quote unquote, DJing sort of setup, these are all just masters. For the kind of stemmed out thing, what I'll usually do is I'll have like a kind of pseudo mastering rack. It's really not that important. Like, you're not gonna get, in most cloud systems, you're not gonna get a fucking amazing sound anyway. So I'll usually just put like maybe a bit of multi-band compression, and I'll run it a little bit in the red here, because I kind of like how it sounds when it's in the red on the master. So, and then you get some, that's like usually enough. You can expand on that a little bit, like maybe with maybe you prefer the oops, that's the wrong plugin. Maybe you prefer like this kind of clipping or some other kind of limiting or whatever. I really would stay away from this limiter because it's a piece of shit. Yeah, that's usually enough, I find. You just have to work on your mixes to make sure that your mixes are good. And yeah. Okay. What to be aware of in sound rehearsal. In like sound check, I think the main thing to be aware of is like what does it sound like? Does it sound good to you? And then communicating with the sound engineer to like, oh, could we do a little bit of this, or could we do a little bit of that? Or waiting for them to kind of, or like maybe you can do a little bit of stuff on your end if there's something that's bothering you. But just be careful that you're not both, like that you and the sound engineer are communicating clearly, that you're being nice to the sound engineer. That's really important, even if they're a dick, because they can really fuck your show up. So be nice to them, listen to them, and talk to them and be clear. And then if they're not able to do something that you want them to do, then you can add it on your master chain of like, oh, I think like it'd be nice to have a little bit more in this range, or the bass isn't loud enough, or it's too loud, or whatever. You can do a little bit of that adjustment on your side. And be careful about your CPU usage also. Like I play it super cautious, and like for my live shows, I try not to go over like 25% CPU usage, because it's like, it starts to get a bit sketchy. Because I don't know why, but gig conditions are always weird. So your computer will use more CPU. And then also because like oftentimes I'll run my own visuals and my own lights and stuff, and UDP will drop messages sometimes if you're already using too much, or Ableton will drop network messages if you're running too much CPU, because it prioritizes the sound. So there's all sorts of shit like that to be aware of, but you don't really have to worry about it for the first bit. And just think about when you're making your set, just think about the fact that like people probably, if it's a show where people are going to be standing up, people are probably going to want to dance. So you kind of want to cater to that. Don't leave a shit ton of like long empty sections of like self-indulgent, just noise. Those things are super fun, and in the right context, they're amazing. And it's really fun when you get to play those kind of shows and you get to go into those kind of tunnels of just fucking around. But yeah, you don't. It's also kind of a really shitty feeling if you like play a show and you're kind of expecting that response, and people are just there to dance, and they're not vibing on that. Okay, so number 4, I know it's mostly a matter of time management availability, but have you thought on starting to make plugins out of Max MSP, like using Juice or other C++ frameworks? No, I have thought about it, but I don't think I'm going to do it. It's not really my MO to like make super snazzy cool plugins, and I don't think I can be bothered to do that. I like Max because it's like fast prototyping, and it's a good way to like try out different ideas in sort of a limited context, and I like that about it. I like that it's like kind of constantly shifting. You can always add or take things out. It's easy to edit, easy to change. So yeah, I don't think I'm going to be doing anything in Juice or C++, to be honest. Okay, Man from Seoul asks, I would like to know some techniques for managing the progression of a song. Things like what sort of techniques you use to manage tension over the course of a song, how you can tell which elements to bring in and out and when to do it, and probably the thing I struggle with most, how you compose tracks so that each separate part is different enough from the rest of the track to remain interesting but similar enough for the song to have a sense of cohesiveness. How you manage these things from both a compositional and sound design aspect is what I'm looking to learn more about. Okay, so let's look at a song example again. I think this is the one we want. Trying to think of what would be a good example for this. I guess let's just do this one again. Oh, okay. Okay, that's a good... I really have to pee, so I'll be back in a second. Nope, that's the wrong thing. Here we go. Okay. Oh, wait, no, we have a BRB screen. Okay, yeah, I'll be right back. Yeah, you can post to your SoundCloud. It's yeah, whatever. I mean, I'm not gonna review them, but yeah, you can always post it. I don't really care about. That's fine. Okay, so oops, this is track review. Where's this? Okay, here we go. Okay, so right, so okay, let me just look at the question. Okay. what sort of techniques you use to manage tension over the course of a song? How can you tell? Wait, what? How you can tell which elements to bring in and out and when to do it, and probably how you compose tracks so each separate part is different enough. Okay, all right. Okay, so let's just start with numero uno. I think this is going to be a good example because I don't think I'm actually done with this song. I feel like it drags a little bit in the end, and let's talk about what that means and how to deal with that and blah blah blah. No, it's fine. I don't have any issue with like multiple questions. The whole point of this is like to answer your questions, so I'm glad you like phrased it completely. Okay, so all right, looking at this one again. Okay, so I mean, I'm not sure if this is going to be a super good example. Well, it might be. We can work off of this to build a kind of more coherent example. So this one has this thing. Okay, so one of the things that I find doesn't maybe work in this track is the way that this part develops into the drop, the first drop. I feel like the point of this is like we start somewhere gentle. We start somewhere gentle, and then we go to, like, it's supposed to be kind of surprising when you jump into the drop, but I think there's probably a better way of doing it, right? So, okay, so first thing that kind of comes up is like, how do you go about knowing when to bring things in? My way of thinking about that is always like my boredom meter. I feel like if you listen to the same thing over and over, it gets boring. And for me, it gets boring really fast. So sometimes I have to tell myself to slow down and not go too quickly. But generally just, so look, we took, what is this, 8 bars. Like that's a pretty long time of just this one sound, but it just repeats twice, right? So we kind of have 2 repetitions of something, and then we bring in a new element. That's a good question, Dendroid, but we're doing questions from patrons right now, so and my feelings are really mixed and long-winded about IDM, so we'll get to that another time, I think. Okay, so yeah, and then you can see like this kind of accelerating happening here, right, where we have this element comes in, and then really quickly this drum break comes in, and the vocals come in, and then all of a sudden we're at this part, right? So I would say that this is maybe not the most effective way of doing this, and I would maybe draw this out a little bit more. So you can Control I into that, and then so one of the things maybe would be like, let's take a little bit more time bringing this guy in. Don't worry, I won't like do this for everything, but just as a kind of quick example, one way I like to bring stuff in is I just sort of have my like bag of tricks for like the way that I'll usually bring stuff in. So if we want to make our lives easier with just one parameter that we're modulating, we can use this. Map it to a macro, except that one's going to be inverted, and we can also, that'll be fine. Okay, so, oh fuck, I fucked that up. Okay, wicked. So now we can kind of slowly introduce this. This drum beat could come in maybe on its own first, and these guys will be muted. Did that work, or where am I at here? Okay, did not work. Fuck. Jesus Christ. So maybe this comes in later, or maybe it comes in much later, or maybe we smooth in the intro a little bit more. Let's move this whole thing over here. Let's take that out, and then we'll go like this. this has to go over there too. So yeah, so this way you get this sort of like smoothing out of this section. And I think a big part of it is like having the patience to give the elements that give the elements the spots that the space that they need to get to where they're going. So like, that sounds so fucking wanky, but so like my impression from this, and so now my impression from this is most likely going to be like, this is fucking too long, and it gets kind of boring, but this kind of thing can really help. Like, so now, okay, and now let's talk about quickly, like, how do we even get to this point, right? So like, if you find things are getting boring, try to shorten your sections and make more stuff change. And we're gonna get to that in a second. So this section is totally just made out of like I took some elements from this main drop, which I made first, and then kind of put them out here because they're like sort of lighter elements. This part is actually this MIDI pattern just with some extra notes. So I'll do that a lot. It's like sort of just rephrasing a melody on a different instrument. That kind of helps to give this sort of like link from one part to a next. I really like doing that. And actually this section as well with the flutes, oh no, this was written just to work with this guy, I think. So yeah, so okay, and then how do you build tension, right? Tension is my kind of take on this is like, you make tension by like making things like, when you think about like melodic tension, it's about like going to a place that really feels like it wants to resolve back to the one, right? Like the 5 chord really feels like it wants to resolve to the one. The 7 chord also really feels like it wants to resolve to the one. And part of that is kind of like, it's the way that those chords fight against the note, like the notes in those chords kind of fight against the notes that are in the 1 chord. They're the kind of far away notes from, or if you think about it as a loop, they're sort of like the close by notes because you go further away until you sort of like loop back. Yeah, so and then I kind of tend to extrapolate that into like effects and all sorts of things. So like, one way is just like getting it more noisy, because the more noisy something is, the more it kind of wants to resolve into something that's less noisy. So that would maybe be a good technique for the end of this section, right? Like, we're in this huge like kind of shit. Let's just take this and try some simple things to like make it more noisy, and maybe that will be a nice way to resolve it. So if we take grain delay, for example, this gets us some kind of weird sound. So like, no, this is on the wrong fucking channel or something. Oh yeah, here we go. This should be here. So let's group this and let's put dry wet to macro 1. We can also probably link time to macro 1, because as the time changes, it'll sound all fucking weird and whacked out. Or we could do the other way around, where like max is 1 millisecond. We could also throw some like reverb on the end of that. This is another trick I really like to do, is like bring in the dry wet, and then 50% is usually enough for that. This is going to be a really loud sound. You can also use stuff like corpus, for example, to give it a kind of weird detuny sort of effect. I really like that kind of stuff. You don't necessarily have to do all of this shit. It's just really just like some. And let's map that to macro 1 as well. And I just want to change that mapping so it's not full dry wet. Okay, so then now we have this one control that right? Like you're kind of like, it's kind of a not amazing example, but this is usually one of many elements that will help it sort of build. So you have this one element which is like building up the like textural tension. You can do this like into a regular drop as well. And often you'll want to, right? Like you want to build up a lot of tension, like da-da-da-da-da-da. It's the same sort of thing. Like the more fast-paced your percussion is, the more it's gonna feel like intense, blah blah blah, and then it'll kind of all pull back, and then you can have your drop. You can also do it on the end of your drop, right? Or on the end of your whatever section that goes into a quieter section. It's kind of about that it's all about that balance. And then so this one, for example, maybe something that we'd want to do is like, let's just put in some more faster hi-hats or something that oftentimes will give you a little bit more build. So let's take, I'm just going to take some easy shit because let's just take some shit like this. So no, this is not working at all. Okay, so we have this kind of slow one. We can have some regular hi-hats. Sometimes I'll use these samples. I really like them. Out of Africa, there's some... Oh, these are the individual hits. Come on. Come on. These are so sick. Where's the fucking drums? Okay, yeah, so I'll use stuff like this quite a lot. And generally the way that I'll do it is like, I'll just take a little section, like quite a dense section, loop that, and then put it on beats mode and give it, I don't know, 16th notes or something. So then we're like, this example is going horribly, but okay. And then so with percussion, like increasing the tempo of the percussion or increasing the density of the percussion, like here I'm just layering. This is a little bit more sparse. This is a little bit more dense, and then you can go even denser. And you can always like bring these in slowly also, like we brought in stuff like this, right, with filters or reverbs or stuff like that. Then the other kind of effective thing is if you are having a hard time writing a melodic thing that gives you that type of tension, you might consider something that we kind of talked about in the feedback stream, which is like just having one note that slowly goes out of tune. We might want something lower there actually. So let's take this one note. Oops. And the more rich you make that, the better it'll sound. Let's get rid of this stuff just for a moment so we can hear that a bit better. so we can just use that, or we can use the channel or whatever. And then, so this also is worth investigating. Like, you can change the notes in here also. Like, so another way is like building a nice, like, dense chord, right? So as we go through, maybe we want to layer another sound in here, like another note. I don't know if that's gonna sound good. Right? So that kind of shit will really help to make it tense. I love that way of like stacking notes to make a chord. Hey. I think that's a really fun way of doing it. Yeah, that's a great idea, Just Bask. That sort of thing. I also bring up the level a fair bit in this one, just to let it kind of come up more. This guy you can also curve a little bit, because it feels like almost like a logarithmic scale of intensity, so curving it kind of helps to smooth that out. Also, again, distortion will help with that. It'll make it sound really fucking crazy. So you can do that in a number of different ways, but we could, for example, just fry it. So maybe we want to fry it a bit more than that. Maybe more aggressively or something. Anyways. So yeah, that sort of distortion thing is going to be, that's a super easy way. Yeah, so that's honestly, you can hear that in my music a shitload. That's like a super kind of effective way of building tension, especially if you're not, I mean, it'll kind of like, building tension melodically will oftentimes like sound like give you kind of better results, but that can be hard, and if you're stuck with that, then the stuff that we sort of just covered, it's like a way around it. If you're able to use the instruments that you have to make those things go into those more tenser parts of the scale, excuse me, then that's an even more effective way of doing, or well, maybe not more effective, but it's another really cool way of doing it. So like, say I were to change that like gangster whine sort of thing, to make that thing change and go to a place where it feels like tense, where it really wants to resolve here. That might be a better way of building tension. And then along with the bass is also a fucking great way to build tension. Like, just, it's called, you can think of it as like bass reharmonization. So just moving the bass note will give you this kind of change, like feeling of change, even if you don't actually change the chords that it's playing against. I've always been really interested in that sort of thing of like pedal notes or pedal, what is it called? Pedal point or something like that. Where you have one droning note and then the way that things change around it. But yeah, I think like playing around with the actual notes and chords that you have is also, that's like the classic way of doing it. Okay, so let's cycle back to the question. So kind of quick recap. How do I tell what things to bring in and out and when to do it? It's mostly based on like listening to it and hearing when, or thinking about when I get bored. Also, like the links between sections don't I really don't think that they have to be super clear links. Like, you can have quite a dramatic change in the song with the same with, and then just like keep some elements or something, and it'll have cohesiveness. It depends on what your definition is of cohesiveness, and the more like cohesive you want it to be, the more you want to use the same elements or same melodies or same textures or whatever, and the more you want it to vary, the less you'll do that kind of stuff. A lot of the times, so this section is actually just like restating this section, but I just played with different bass sounds and bass notes, and then I did something different for the vocals. And to me, that's actually part of why this song feels like it's dragging a lot, is that this second section doesn't really say anything new. So I think the goal with that is like, okay, what can I introduce here to make this start to move along a little bit more? And the more it feels like it's dragging, the more I'll do things in smaller increments. So it'll be like, okay, this is where the part starts, or the section starts, and I'll start introducing one new element here, and then another new element here, another new element here. There'll be some other change here, another change here, another change here, another change here, depending on how. So if that's really boring, then I'll kind of progress at that pace. If it's already feeling pretty good, then I'll slow it down to like another element here, another element here, another element here. If it's really working already, then sometimes you can get away with just like letting half of it play and then adding something new for the second half or something. But yeah, in this case, I think like I need to go in here and make some pretty dramatic changes in order for this to really work for me. And I think the way I might go about that is by thinking more about the harmonies and stuff that come out of these voices, and maybe changing the pitches of different elements to match those things a little bit more. If you feel like it's seriously lacking tension, another thing that you can do that helps is to lock into a repetitive groove. That'll help it that'll help it move along as well. Okay, so I think that's it. Okay, so on to knowledge. How do you maintain discipline and dedication to your music making when enthusiasm wanes? Similarly, how do you avoid getting repetitive with your sounds, rhythms, melodies? Okay, let's read this whole question. In your streams, you always wear headphones. Is this typical of your non-stream production, or do you prefer monitors? I have roommates, so I tend to wear headphones when making tunes, but I've always have to deal with a bunch of stuff when I hear it over the monitors. How do you anticipate this difference? I'd love to get more of a faux 3D effect in my tunes. What techniques do you use to mimic the Doppler effect when sounds move through the space, and how do you interplay with your reverb, panning, etc.? Oh, that's a really good question. Classic question, but who are the producers you hold in the highest esteem for their mixing, sound design, innovation, overall feel, etc.? What are some top-notch mix tracks that you use for reference when doing your own mix downs? Okay, lots of really good questions in there. Let's start with the first one. So, how do you maintain discipline and dedication to your music when enthusiasm wanes? So, okay, so that is a really, really, really good question. Especially since I recently have been through and have gone through a big section of like less enthusiasm. And I think the thing that I found the most that helps the most is like trying to pick a project that is the appropriate amount of challenging. If you pick something that's like totally out of your know-how, then it'll kind of end up being another block for you, I think. But if you choose something that's really kind of at the edge of what you're able to do, so yeah, if you pick a project that's sort of like, I sometimes come at it from the idea of like, what's the hardest thing that I can do? What's the most difficult thing I can figure out, that I can try to figure out how to do, and then just kind of go from there, and try to do that. So that's kind of what I was doing with the AI project that I was working on, and that's, I think, like slightly too far ahead for what I wanted, but it's really pushing me a lot. Same thing with these kind of tracks. Like, I found that I was thinking, like, I don't really like the way that I make basses, and I would like to have some kind of like heavy bassy stuff in my catalog. So I decided to kind of push myself in this direction. And at the same time, I've always been really interested in like in like these kind of experimental types of progressions in songs. So I'm trying to think about like how can I do those things and still have it sort of read as like a bassy track, and then also trying to think about like how would the progression work in the album, like thinking about how I wanted to start reasonably accessible and then just get further and further and more fucked up as the album progresses until it gets to kind of like peak craziness. So yeah, and then, you know, you sort of set that challenge for yourself, and you might not feel like it most days, but then it's just about having a good balance of like knowing when to take breaks, and also knowing when to kind of like push yourself and be like, okay, well, I don't feel like making music, but I'm gonna put in half an hour, or I'm gonna put in an hour, or whatever, just to, you know, put in some time, get some practice in. And you can also do different but related tasks. So one of the things that I'll do a lot is like sound design sessions. If I'm totally fucked, I have no idea, that I'll do a sound design session, or I'll set a little challenge sort of for myself, like, okay, well, I wonder if I can make a techno track, or I wonder if I can make this or that or the other thing, and that kind of helps to keep the ball rolling. And then how do you avoid getting repetitive with your sounds, rhythms, melodies? That's another difficult thing. I think what I sort of do naturally is, like, once I've heard something a certain amount of times, I'm sort of like, okay, this is getting boring. I need to figure something else out. And then at that point, it's sort of just like, okay, let's figure out what other ways I could take stuff. Like, what other ways, like, so for example, if my rhythms are getting boring to me, then I'll maybe check out some YouTube videos about weird time signatures or weird meters or something like that, or like rhythms from different cultures and stuff, and like kind of think about how those things might inform what I'm doing. I think also, like, and then, for example, for melody stuff, that's kind of what I've been doing in the past year, is like just learning a little bit more about music theory and stuff, and how maybe some of those ideas might be able to work in the context of my music. The other thing that helps me a lot, I find, is that, like, and this is I guess this is kind of a personal thing, but like my goal for what I want my music to sound like is really far in the distance. Kind of said it there like a long time ago, and I didn't really do that consciously. I just have this sound in my head of what I want my music to sound like, and every time I make something, it doesn't really feel like I've gotten there, and I just want to like push myself to get to that place that I hear in my head. But I also think like the stuff that I make along the way is cool and interesting, and I want to release that stuff too, because I like all the stuff along the way. So that's kind of my way of dealing with those things, and I think like there's loads of different ways. There's loads of different ways of addressing that problem, and you kind of have to find the way that works for you, right? Like for the discipline and dedication stuff, it's sort of like, for me, it's always like short circuit that. Like, don't think about how do you forget about like discipline and dedication. How do you get the enthusiasm back? Like, try and approach the problem from that perspective of like what are the things that I really like doing? Why don't I just do those? You know, and then that also will help with the getting repetitive in your own style. Is like if you're trying to do your own style, like you're gonna get fucking bored of that, right? And then your enthusiasm is gonna wane. So there's gonna be something that is exciting to you, and exactly like and again, to kind of bring it out to a concrete example, like right now the thing that's exciting to me is like gnarly bass sounds. I don't know why, and I don't really care. Like I'm just like, I just want to make some gnarly bass. So that's what I'm thinking about, and that's what's the most fun. And then I don't need any discipline or dedication. I just do the thing that's fun. Okay, so about headphones. For years, I did prefer monitors. Now I have an apartment where the acoustics are not optimal, and I don't really have the money to invest in like a good acoustic setup. So yeah, I'll wear my headphones for production, say 99% of the time now. And I think like you kind of answered your own question here. Like, I always have to deal with a bunch of stuff when I hear it over the monitors. How do I anticipate this difference? So a little bit later, you say, oh wait, where the fuck? Yeah. Here you say, what are some top-notch mixed tracks that you use for reference during your own mixdowns? So that's a great way to deal with that problem that you had before, is like use a reference for your mix tracks, and then if your track sounds like that, then it's most likely going to work on the monitors. Although you have to have, like, this comes with some caveats. You have to have headphones that you trust, and you have to get used to those headphones, so that and they have to be relatively high quality, right? So if you have headphones that you know are good in the first place, two, you've had them for a while, so you're used to them, and then you can trust. And then like learning to trust them also is like listen to stuff on your headphones and then listen to it on monitors, and then you start to know like, oh, my headphones, if I want to make it punchy, I need to make it even more like over the top punchy on my headphones in order for it to have a good amount of punch on the monitors. And like also don't use the monitors that you have as like the end all be all, right? Like that might not be the perfect way of simulating what it's going to sound like in a club or on a fucking whatever system. And it's always like a system of approximation. Like you can't there's no unbiased speakers. There's no such thing. It's always going to be biased in some way. And like the better the speakers, the less there is bias. The more acoustic treatment you have, the more and better acoustic treatment that you have, the less bias it's going to be, and the better you're going to be able to tell what it's going to sound like on other speakers. But it's never going to, like, because everybody has different speakers that are biased in different ways, you're never going to get like the perfect mix that's going to sound amazing on everybody's monitors. It's just about kind of finding the best middle ground, you know? So I think like go back and forth, test it on the monitors, and then come back on the headphones and see what it sounds like once you've made the adjustments that you needed to make it sound good on the monitors. And then it's just like learning to trust your headphones. Okay. I'd like to get more of a faux 3D effect in my tunes. What techniques do you use to mimic the Doppler effect when sound? Okay, so I do not mimic the Doppler effect when sounds move through space, but we can talk about how you might do that, and how do you interplay your reverb, panning, etc. So I actually, I usually, like, I don't think about the 3D-ness so much. I just and like even in this track there's nothing really crazy going on with the panning, and that's never been the case that I'll do like really crazy stuff in the panning. If you want to get super crazy with the panning, I would suggest getting some like binaural effect. Those will give you some really crazy wide sounds on headphones, and they sound pretty interesting on speakers as well. They don't sound exactly like they do on headphones, but it's still a pretty interesting sound. Stereo widening in general I'll do with, where's an example? I'm not even doing that much stereo widening in this. Okay, so stereo widening I'll usually do just with the delay plugin. Here, this is like really standard has delay. One side is a little bit delayed and the other side is not. And then, or you can do it the other way around to widen it kind of in the other direction. This will sort of offset the sound to one side. So sometimes I'll compensate for that by like doing this and then panning it back into the middle. Yeah, Rob does a lot of binaural stuff. But yeah, like just go get a bunch of binaural plugins. There's quite a few free ones also. Also, a lot of like binaural stuff is just convolution and impulse responses. So if you have a good convolution reverb, you might be able to figure out a way to do binaural stuff just like that. Anyway, so this, I also, honestly though, so that's when I find that this stuff is often more effective than binaural, because binaural is like, it also depends on your head. Like, does everybody know how binaural stuff works? Does anybody want a quick rundown? I'll just give a quick rundown. So, the premise of binaural, sorry, 1 second. Oh God. The premise of like binaural audio is that your brain, part of the way that it locates the sound in 3D is that it let's put some quiet lo-fi hip hop in the background. This is just a talking stream really. Is this going? We going? What's happening? There we go. Come on, play us some shit. Okay, great. All right. So yeah, the premise of binaural sound is like if a sound is coming from, let me switch the views so that we can see my camera a bit more. Oh, I'll just go like this. Okay, so the premise of binaural stuff is like, if you have a sound that's like coming from over here-ish, then as that sound travels towards your head, it's gonna get to, first of all, it'll get to this ear first because it's closer to this ear, and some of the sound will be filtered by your face, by the sound hitting your face and bouncing off of it and doing weird whatever. So there's like a slight filtering effect happening before the sound gets to this ear. And then if you think about the reflections in a room also, you're gonna hear not just the sound will get here, but it'll also bounce off, the wall over there, or the wall over there, and then it will reach and then bounce again off the back wall or whatever, and then reach there. Usually the solutions don't take that much into account. Dendroid, the two sounds combining into one in your head and it makes a third tone. I think what you're thinking about is binaural beats, which is a slightly different psychoacoustic phenomenon. So the idea of binaural panning is like, and then there's also some like slightly different filtering that happens if the sound is like above you or behind you. There's some different things that come from that, right? But a big part of that is the way that your head is shaped, right? Because of the ways that each of our heads are shaped and the way our ears are shaped and blah, 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 our brain is used to decoding that information based on the specific filtering and delay and whatever that's happening because of our head, right? So So the a binaural solution that's set for somebody with a really different head than you is going to be a lot less effective for you. So what people usually do for binaural solutions is like they'll find a sort of like good in-between head and do stuff on there. One way of doing it is like recording with binaural mics, which are little mics that go inside your ears, and then everything that's coming into those mics is going to go through that same filtering process as shit that goes into your ears would go through. So then you can kind of make recordings in that way. You can also fake it by, again, like I was saying with convolution reverb, they'll record like impulse responses with like a styrofoam head or somebody's head with the headphones inside, and then you'll use that impulse response to process the audio directly, and then blending between those you can get this simulation of the sound moving through all these different places. So that's obviously super cool, and if you haven't tried using binaural mics, or you haven't tried using like binaural audio plugins that like emulate that sort of effect, I really recommend trying it because it's fucking weird and it's really cool. But I don't often use them, to be honest. And then the thing that what's it called? Dendroid was talking about is something called like binaural beating, and that is like a really interesting psychoacoustic phenomenon that, like, if you have two let me illustrate and then draw. Or actually, let me illustrate on the fucking graphing calculator. That'll be even better. So, y equals sin. Wait, I'm not sure if this is the right way to do this. Oh yeah, here we go. X and then y equals sin x times 1.01, 1.1. Okay. So here we have like two sine tones at two different pitches, right? And oh, I wonder if we can do this. I wonder if it'll let us do this. We'll call this A, call this B, and then we'll say like C equals A plus B. Okay, yeah, this is perfect. So this will show us like how these two waves pile up. So the interference pattern that happens with these two waves makes this third wave, which undulates in amplitude, which you can see a lot better if we zoom out. So here's our third wave. This is the combination of the two that are slightly two sine waves that are slightly out of tune, right? We get this one sine wave that is undulating in volume, and that's because of the interference pattern that's created with these guys. So you can see here they're like almost perfectly out of phase. There's actually like a place where they are perfectly out of phase, I think. And then they'll line up and then they'll be in phase again. So that'll be the loudest because you just add those numbers together for whatever point, and they go out of phase again, etc., etc. So that's a thing that happens in physics with sound waves as they're traveling towards you in the air, right? But there's a really cool thing that, like, if you just play one sine tone in one ear and then one sine tone's at a slightly different pitch in the other ear, your brain will just do that. Like, it'll just combine them and make this interference pattern, even though the pressure waves are not actually interacting in real life. It's just happening in your head. So there's this kind of pseudoscientific theory that I mean, I actually don't know how scientific this theory is, but there's this theory, let's say, that says that, like, because your brain is the one that's combining these two sounds. If you listen to two pitches that are slightly out of tune, then that new oscillation, the speed of this third wave, this third combination wave, the speed of this, that fourth wave, let's call it, which is like the speed of change of this, or whatever the fuck you would call that. That is that is the like brainwave speed that stimulates, because your brain is making that interference pattern. So I honestly don't know how scientific that is. I remember reading a lot of stuff about it when I was younger, but I don't know. I wasn't really so concerned with whether the sources were reliable. I was just more interested in the idea. I think like, I'm not entirely sure like how well this would be at inducing those different brainwave frequencies, and then there's like this theory that like these different brainwave frequencies correspond to different states of excitation. You know, like a really slow oscillation is going to be like, say we were to do 0.05 or something, this will be a slower one, this will be an even slower one, yada yada yada. So, and then this is like a much faster one, and that those correspond to what's it called? Yeah, different states of excitation. So the higher frequency ones are sort of like what am I talking about? Higher frequency ones are like, you know, more agitated or whatever, and then the slower ones are more calming and whatever. Anyways, that's a brief overview of binaural beating, which is not what we were talking about. I don't know how I got sidetracked into that, whatever. Right. So what I tend to use is like, this is a great stereo expanding technique. You're basically sort of simulating, and this is kind of, I got this idea based on like learning how reverbs work, which are basically like, algorithmic reverbs are usually like a sequence of different length delays with all pass filters in between to sort of like blur the delay lines. And then and you can kind of simulate that blurring by doing like a granular delay, and then just like randomizing the panning of each grain, and that'll give you this sort of sound of like a small room. It doesn't sound quite like a small room reverb because it doesn't have that sharpness to it, but it gives you this nice widening of the sound because you have these different grains that are spaced like kind of randomly in the stereo field. So this is my approach to doing that, which is just like a little bit of spray, generally a pretty low frequency, and then like once you pass 50% on dry wet, it kind of, the effect is like not as fun, I guess. So I usually kind of just like blend it in a little bit, and a really short delay time. So I really like using that technique for stereo expanding, and then also just like taking care to pan your elements. Like if we look through this mix, you see like each element, nothing's panned super hard or anything, but each element has a little space in the stereo field. The other thing is like really intentional panning really helps a lot. So like one thing to think about is like think about compressing and expanding the stereo field. So like sometimes bring things to mono or bring things really small in the stereo field. Like even better than mono is like with a little bit of reverb to make it sound even like a little bit far away and small, coming out of like a small speaker or something, and then get super wide with like some stereo expanding tricks, and having a good control over that change between really small in the stereo field and really big in the stereo field will give you a lot of this really nice kind of like breathing effect in the stereo field, which helps the sound feel really big, because it's almost always like it's about contrast, right? If you set an auto pan on every single one of your elements and then just like fucking auto pan everything all over the place, your brain just hears it as like a mess of like shit panned all over the place. It's not really that interesting to listen to. There's also like also an interesting thing to do is to like on certain little breaks and stuff, think about really intentionally panning things from one side to another. Or maybe it makes a little zip around, or maybe you use a binaural panner to make it go like zzz, or something like that. Those little touches I find are so much more effective than like constantly having everything panning around. I also work a lot with like stereo samples, so like each little sample has a little place in the stereo field, so then those things are kind of like just in their own little places. M2 Records says toms are a great example, and I very much agree with that. Okay. And then the last question. Oh, right. Who are the producers you hold in the highest esteem for their mixing, sound design, innovation, overall feel, etc.? So I don't usually use reference tracks for my mix downs these days. I'll do it if a track is like particularly challenging, but generally I'm not so concerned about it. And we can look at my Spotify to see what kind of producers I really like these days. I mean, Rob Clouth is obviously like one of my biggest inspirations. And yeah, so his work I really obviously hold in high regard. And it's kind of great for all the reasons that you talked about, like sound design, innovation, overall feel, mixing, panning. It's also great for that. There's some stuff that I've been getting into. Where's the sounds I like now playlist? So there's quite a lot of this stuff I've been getting into, like Sega Bodega, Sophie, Shy Girl, Kai Whiston, Plume, not so much, but whatever. Whipped Cream is also pretty good. St. John Hawk, Zora Jones. I also even like kind of some of this more PC music stuff, like A.G. Cook sometimes. Sometimes it's a bit too much. Yeah, I think that's most of it. Igloo Ghost is also great. James Holden, I love James Holden stuff. Not a huge fan of One O Tricks Point Never. But there's some really good stuff that One O Tricks has put out. I know that's probably not a very popular opinion, but whatever. What else we got? This is some of the more kind of like just chill stuff I like to listen to. I listen to like quite a lot of rap, and there's some One O Tricks Point Never songs that I like. Tom Waits also. I really like Tom Waits. This is a really hard question. I don't usually think about that in terms of like I don't know. I don't really think about like what am I trying to say here? I try not to like set my overall goal in terms of other people's music. Like I do in some senses, for sure. There's some things that I aspire to that other artists do really well, and I think like it would be hard to kind of go through this list and detail every single little point of like, oh, I really like this element and that inspired me a lot, and this element, I mean, we could potentially do that. I'm not sure if I'm really in the mood to do that right now, but we could maybe one day do that, go through and just talk about like what elements really work for me and what songs and have inspired me. That might be like a pretty long video. But then I one of the things that I try to do also is like I try to think about what is the character of Woulg, like what is this kind of like thing that I've made, and like I try to think about like what does it mean for a song to be like a woulg track? What does it mean for a song to like be recognizable as woulg, or like what are the kind of key elements of my style that I like and I want to keep kind of pushing forward, and like and how can I do that? I also think a lot about like when I'm listening to stuff, I'm kind of like, oh, that's an interesting idea, maybe I'll try something similar in my music and just try to make it my own thing. Or like I like certain feels and and I'm like inspired by them, but I often don't get so wrapped up in that. I mean, it depends on the day too. Like sometimes I'll just be obsessed with the song and be like, oh, I want to make this exact song, and then whatever. But yeah, so it's kind of the stuff I try to do. Okay. How the hell do you move something into an instrument rack without duplicating the track and copying the instrument and effects over? So if you have, here we have an example. So we have this, we can use this instrument rack as well, it's fine, you can do nested groups. Just shift and select all of them, and then Control G will put them all into an instrument rack. And then you can start mapping your macros. Okay, and then when's the next release? There should be 2 new woulg releases coming out this year. One will be in November, I think, November, December, somewhere around there. And another one will be hopefully this summer. I'm not entirely sure how quickly we'll be able to figure that out, but yeah, so it's kind of a vague timeline of when more stuff is going to come out. But yeah, hopefully there will be 2 new ones this year. And then can you demo how to design a tearing kind of exponential rhythm sound? Okay, so sure, let's do that. My pleasure. Thanks for being a patron. I really appreciate that. Yeah, so today's stream is all like answering questions from patrons. And we're actually like pretty close to being done. Okay, so let's quickly just make sure I understand what the concept is. Like, when I think of like exponential rhythm, I think about stuff like this. So this is gonna be too fast, I think. Oops. Ooh. Oh. Yeah, I tend to think of like... Oh. Let's switch this off of... Where's that fucking mode? Here we go. Oh, that's a bit too tight, I guess. Yeah, I tend to think of these kind of sounds, of like ticka 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 ticka. So there's tons of different ways of doing that. One is with the delay, obviously. I don't know why this thing is on like... Oh, this is brutal. So that's not really working for me, but... So another way would be like... I mean, you can always do this kind of thing, where you just freeze, flatten, and then we can just use our good old copy paste. So do a couple of reps of that, and then do. Oops, maybe this one will be longer. This one's longer, and then we end up with like a. And then the more you refine this timing thing, let's make these guys shorter. The more kind of nice and smooth this like exponential rhythm type thing is going to be. So there's that approach. And the nice thing about this too is like after we can just consolidate this and then make this whatever tempo that we want, right? Or we could if we were walking. Yeah, so then, right, or a repitch. We could do that kind of thing. Yeah, that's a great point. Simpler is a great example of doing that. You can also do the same thing in operator with operator has this thing here, this looping. What's the trick here? Loop, I think. Oops. So you can do this kind of thing. Well, let's, oops. You're gonna have to, there's like a little example. You could maybe do it like this too. No, that doesn't work. Yeah, something along those lines is gonna give you. Those are all some nice, interesting iterations. Same thing, simpler. You've got the simpler looping, which we don't have to go into too much, but let's grab some. Where the fuck are my samples? Sure. Great. So here we have like a loop. Oops. You got that sort of situation. Sound in peripherals when I ask the questions. What do you mean sounds in peripherals? Yeah, you could for sure do it with kicks. Okay, let's take a listen to peripherals then. Okay. Yeah, this is going to be a lot of like playing with this type of stuff, I think. You can make this kind of come alive a little bit more too if you, let's go here and like, oh, that's not gonna work. Okay, oh yeah, so there's another way of doing this. We can do, say our sound is like this. Let's take this out. Like, okay, sure, whatever. And then we can use arpeggiator to do a similar sound. And then, so there's, yeah, a nice solution would be for each sound to sort of play out as well, right? So, although you might get something nice from that. You could also, I mean, I feel like there's a way to do it with grain delay also. So like, you would maybe have, oh, this is going to give us the wrong. Oh. No, this is not the right way to do it. What about if we did something like this? So, fuck, I really thought this. Oh, here we go. I don't know why it doesn't play out those notes. There we go. So now, okay, so yeah, so that's kind of like a little bit more what we were looking for. And then we could pan those randomly to get kind of the thing that we want. Yeah, ARP trick is probably I feel like this is the easiest way to do it. Yeah, and there's probably a couple different ways that Tipper's doing that. Also, another fucking great trick is like, so say we just have, let's try to whip this together. Free rate. This is a pretty long. Oh, let's make this fucking way longer. No, stretch, please. Why? Okay. Why? No, come on. Don't be like that. Okay, great. So I think we want a curve. Let's use the retrigger. I think that was kind of working a bit better. Oh no, that works. Okay, so we have a sound like this, right? Now if we freeze this and reverse it, we're gonna get some pretty great sounding shit, in my opinion. And that's a really, I think, crucial part of doing this kind of stuff is like fucking always try it backwards. Try it sped up. Try it slowed down. We can do other stuff with this now too, right? We can use this texture mode to get different shapes. Right? And then from like, there's just tons of options once you get into this area, like, and this will kind of be better or worse depending on your situation. And then, yeah, so that I think that this is kind of probably a great place to start. And then also you can change this pattern too. This is another fucking awesome way of doing this, is like you can write your exponential slowdown thing here in transients. Like, let's say this is our slowdown. And then we go beats, transient. So now we've got all sorts of different sounds that we can do, and we can use, I don't know, corpus, or we can make this into a whole different sound, you know? And you can do this with any sound. Like, this doesn't have to be a thing. Stretching on the fly, you just use Shift. And then if you want it off the grid, you hold down Alt as well. Yeah. So we've got lots of great options there. You can make it a bit more tonal, maybe. or the other way around. Yeah, this and then delays again will give you lots of great options here too. Grain delay might actually be pretty interesting here. It's kind of a fun one. Let's try with delay like this. Where's that fucking thing? Or maybe you do want to repitch it. Whoopsie. So just record a session like that. You'll have shit tons of like fun stuff to play with. Yeah. But I think the big takeaway is just like resample all the time. Always resample. That's always my approach. Okay. Did you test Supermassive already? No, I don't even know what Supermassive is. Let's put on the lo-fi hip hop and take a listen. Check it out. Is it a VST or something? All right, now this. Cool.
In this video, we're going to build a groove from scratch.
Oh, fuck you. Oh, I thought that was this. God damn it. Where's the drop, bro? Okay, whatever. Yeah, cool. I'm interested. Where to download Valhalla? Where's there? Yeah. Sure. Let us download. Yeah, looks cool. Okay, so here's where I'm at. I'm tempted to kind of open things up to like just general questions, but I also want to say like like the point of this stream. Whoops. How do you do this again? Control. There we go. The point of this stream is like to like prioritize the patrons. So I just set up a Patreon account. If you're able to support, that'd be really cool. Yeah, so if you're able to join me on there, that'd be super awesome. If not, it's all good. There's still going to be lots of free stuff. I'm never going to stop giving away free stuff. But yeah, so that's one of the perks, is that I'm going to start doing these streams where that are just sort of like special for the patrons, and this one happened to be where like patrons can ask questions and like give these long answers, going super in detail. So yeah, that's a good question though. Knowledge. So Knowledge says, I feel like you always use the native effects and instruments. Is that for our sake so we can mimic what you're doing, or just because you prefer them over plugins? I generally use these. I don't know. I don't know why, to be honest. I just like using the stock ones. I'll use VSTs for like mastering. I'll use VSTs for reverbs, because the Ableton reverb is still not that great. It depends on the context, but yeah. I think that's about it. Denoising and stuff like that. Yeah, FabFilter is fucking great. I love FabFilter. Yeah, I really like FabFilter stuff. What else we got? Yeah, I don't know. There's a bunch of stuff. I kind of find that I favor these plugins because I feel like if I understand what I'm doing, I can probably make it work with these. And if I can't make it work with these, I can probably build it in Max. And if I can't build it in Max or make it work with these, then I don't understand how it works, you know? And that's something that I'm really interested in, is understanding how all this stuff works. It isn't to say like you shouldn't use stuff you don't understand. Of course you should use stuff you don't understand. I just find that like I like to start with the idea of like, okay, what do I want to kind of do with the sound, or what kind of stuff can I do with my limited, you know, like stock plugins, and then just sort of go from there. But yeah, and I mean that's like a nice other thing about it, is that like when I use native stuff in tutorial videos, then it's kind of great because then there's no like barrier. I just realized it should be a little bit higher. Okay. So yeah, so I think that's gonna be it for today. I'm a little bit pooched, to be honest. I didn't get a ton of sleep last night. So I'm gonna, and it's fucking hot here. Like it's like a crazy heat wave. No, Teddy, I didn't end up checking those Freak Show Industry plugins. I don't think. Can you post the link again? I'm super down to check those out. My pleasure. Yeah. And then for those of you that are patrons, like, feel free to ask any questions that you want. I'm always going to try to get to them and do as much like in-depth response to them as I can. And I don't know, we'll figure something else out for other people. Yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna have a new tutorial video out in the next couple of days, so stay tuned for that on my what am I saying? Yeah, stay tuned to YouTube, my YouTube channel, because there's going to be a new tutorial video. Bass from bed. How to bass. Not how to bass. Some bass. Some thoughts about bass. Yeah. Anyways, wicked. Thanks so much, Griffith, for the sub. That is very much appreciated. Cool. And yeah, so thanks again. Take care. See you on Saturday for the track feedback. Yeah.